Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Hi, I'm Greg Frick, back again with HFO-TV. Today we're going to talk with Scott Thayer, principal at Ankrom Moisan Architects. And we want to talk today about kind of the sustainable design projects and topics that we see in multifamily. So first off, thanks for coming.
Happy to be here.
It's been a pretty exciting time in multifamily, and a curious thing that we have from a lot of our clients are looking at are what kind of things are changing with this renewable and the sustainable designs that we see in multifamily. We hear a lot about it in single family. Maybe you can shine a little light on kind of some specific strategies you've seen with some of your development partners.
Be very happy to talk about that.
We've seen the last few years, I know there's been, Energy Trust has given money, kind of maybe global picture where the, from an architect standpoint, where have we seen this whole kind of sustainable track? Maybe give a little history on that.
Yeah, overall sustainability, I think it caught fire a bit, maybe 10 years ago, and kind of was a hot topic, and LEED ratings were big, and we had quite a few incentives from some state and federal programs too for different things. Some of those have kind of died down a bit, and we see fewer LEED rated buildings right now. I think sustainability has become a little bit more part of the norm, and so it's not quite such a new thing, but a little bit more a standard procedure to some extent, but at least to a baseline level. But there's still a lot of new territory and new ground to cover in sustainable design.
And in the history, was LEED more of a federal program that was pushed through, kind of to lead the way to, like I said, I remember back in the 5-10 years ago, there was a big deal. Oh, our building is LEED certified and all that.
Yes, and it's still a program that any project could choose to go after, but a lot of jurisdictions required it. City of Portland required it in certain areas. South Waterfront projects were required to have a LEED rating by the City of Portland. So different, in federal governments, projects still require either a LEED rating or some sort of green certification on it. But it has died down a little bit, and I think it's more just like what makes sense for a project. How do you do energy efficiency, for instance, on a project is more where most of our clients are looking, as opposed to the certifications and the plaques. And so.
Yeah, it always seemed that we saw more LEED certification in more the office environment, retail, as opposed to the multifamily and single family.
I think that's always been true, except in some of these special cases, like on the South Waterfront, we've done LEED.
When you've got a development.
But typically, we see it more in the office environment than the multifamily housing.
And so what are you seeing now, kind of as we're moving closer, like you said, sustainable is more of it's not just a special plaque you want to put on your building, it's just kind of the way the whole environment's moving. What are kind of the design elements that you're seeing that have, or maybe people wouldn't think about? We all talked about energy efficient windows and instant hot water heaters, things like that make them more efficient. But more specifically, what are some of the unique ones that people maybe are not aware of?
Well, some of the more unique things probably are. It's maybe not super unique, but solar hot water is actually a really good strategy that we're still using quite a bit, especially on multifamily housing projects. It's multifamily housing has a high domestic hot water demand, and so the solar hot water, as opposed to solar photovoltaic, which is the electric version of solar panels, the solar hot water has, is very efficient relative to meeting domestic hot water needs. More on the cutting edge, I guess, we're starting to see more net zero projects. That's where net zero energy and or net zero water, where on an net annual basis, they use no outside power. They're reducing the amount of energy that they require, and then any energy they do require, the building requires, is provided on site by photovoltaics or geothermal or maybe wind or some of those other alternative means. So that's a pretty aggressive strategy. There have been a couple multifamily housing projects in Portland that have gone there. And we've had a passive house as another sort of leading edge approach. And we have our Orchards at Arenco project out in Hillsborough that is a passive house project. And that's a very aggressive insulation strategy. Not so much emphasis on the on-site renewable energy production side, but it's heavily insulated, triple glazed windows, very thick.
So it's more trying to reduce the amount of energy they're using.
Right, so they say you can heat it with a hairdryer, a typical unit. So it reduces the mechanical heating and cooling needs a lot. So really drives down the energy requirements.
Now, did that come from the single family market into the multifamily, or was it the other way around?
I think that started more in single family. It started in Europe, actually. It's a German program originally, and it was pretty popular in Europe starting about 15 years ago. And then it's just started to come into the multifamily housing market more so. In fact, the Orchards project that we did is the largest multifamily project in North America that's gotten the Passive House certification. So and Walsh built it, and Reach, affordable housing developer, built it. Right. And so it took a good team that really wanted to do this. And there's a cost premium involved, but it uses 50 to 70% less energy than a standard new construction project.
Which is going to be passed on to the tenant, or the tenant's already
exactly,
paying. Right.
or to the extent that the owner, the tenant will, or the owner will share those costs one way or another. So that savings is realized by the developer and or the tenants.
Now, is a passive house is that going to work on a podium style construction, or is it more of a garden style suburban?
That project is a 4-story. It would work fine on a podium. It's all the Orchards project happens to not have a concrete podium, but it would work on that type of project. Although, once you get into really high-rise construction, I think it's probably less likely to happen. But it really depends on a really tight air barrier as well as just high insulation values.
So in talking about kind of the passive house and it's more the materials, what are kind of the changes in materials that you're seeing in terms of sustainability? Is it different kind of wood products? Is it different kind of siding? What are you seeing in that regard moving forward?
So in the materials realm, that's an interesting topic. We see a lot of, there's some new things coming on. Cross-laminated timber, CLT, is a new structural product that's, we're about to get a project here in Portland.
As opposed to using steel?
This would be more for larger buildings in place of steel or concrete typically. So it's not a substitute for light wood framing. It's a substitute for larger steel construction typically. And
is there any seismic benefit to using that versus using the steel?
Yeah, there's still, the jurisdictions are still going through the codes implications of the CLT technology and trying to evaluate how it performs in seismic. But overall, they think it is actually is a better material in seismic conditions than steel. Yeah.
And did that come from Europe as well?
Started in Europe again. Scandinavia in particular, they've done a lot of CLT projects for 10 or 15 years, and now I think I just heard there's going to be an Oregon manufacturer of CLT.
Oh, really? Okay.
Within the next year, I think.
So they're not even sustainable from that standpoint, also
sure,
from the economy.
Exactly, aren't importing this, shipping it across from Europe or something to get the product. So that makes a big difference in sustainability too.
And what about siding and things like that? Is there a siding that's that's getting pushed more? We've had all our issues here. Variety of different siding manufacturers. Yes,
that's true.
It's a whole other video conference.
That's true. We end up using more. Durability is a big issue. We're seeing in the more economical projects, we still use a lot of the cement fiber panels like Hardy product. But also a lot of metal panel and other more durable materials. The City of Portland is getting stricter in their design review on the quality level of a lot of siding materials too, so that affects some of our choices. But another big thing that has become a real topic is the indoor air quality and healthy materials, and so we're seeing that even in multifamily, also of course medical and other projects. Right. But the multifamily environment is really becoming sensitive to people with allergies, people with asthma and those sorts of things, and to the extent that we can reduce VOCs in those indoor materials that aren't off-gassing toxic elements into the interior environment, that's becoming actually kind of one of the more recent trends that we're seeing.
So that's on the interior materials, carpets, cabinetry.
Yeah, so that's not
right.
The siding is.
It's not an energy usage thing. It's
anything inside the weather barrier of the building. Okay. We look at that issue deeply.
And when you're doing sustainability, I know a lot of people hear sustainability, they think it's renewable products, but it's also products that have a longer lifespan.
Totally.
I mean, that's in terms of if we're not having to reside every 20 years, so maybe lighten up, talk a little bit about that.
Life cycle analysis is a buzzword in sustainable design, and it's really looking at that total life, both from an embodied energy content standpoint, the use of materials, just how much stuff and energy goes into a building and over its entire life, not just at the point of construction. So it really looks at and how much it takes to maintain those products over the years. So the maintainability, do they require a lot of coats of paint every 5 years or not, and then also their recyclability at the end of life as well. So there's this concept of cradle to cradle when you look at the entire lifespan of a building, and trying to come up with products and materials and systems that minimize the impact and the costs, frankly, too, to the owner of the building.
How much push does a municipality have in terms of making sustainability, up in the forefront, as opposed to the owner or the architect saying, "Hey, I want to do a sustainable building," or "These are what is important"? Are they getting more involved in pushing this program through?
Yeah, I think there's a couple answers to that. One is from the building code standard, and the building codes continue to get stricter about energy in particular. Okay. Energy and water use. Our building codes have been getting stronger and stronger relative to the requirements for energy performance. Now we're required to do rain screen envelopes, and we're required, the insulation standards and the energy performance standards have continued to increase from a code standpoint. So that's one driver.
Which continues to put pressure on you designing things that are sustainable.
That's a minimum efficient code requirement. Right. This is a baseline requirement for any building now. That bar has continued to be raised. And then on a much more random approach, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, different jurisdictions have different requirements for either consideration of sustainable design, or sometimes advantages or benefits in the permit approval process. If you're doing sustainable programs, they will often give you a fast track on the permitting process, for instance. So that varies greatly from one locale to another based on the jurisdictional processes. And just city policies. I mentioned City of Portland has had certain policies in South Waterfront or certain districts to require certain levels of sustainable design on the projects. Yeah, so that varies a lot, but there's still, jurisdictions there's still a number of places that are having some advantage or some benefit to doing sustainable design based on their policies.
Are there designs, not so much materials, are there designs that you're looking at that would be, quote, maybe you would say is sustainable, this is how we used to do a garden style or a tower multifamily, now we're changing it. Maybe you can shine some light on some of those.
That's a good question. Scale of the project does impact the overall, let's talk about energy for a moment. It affects everything. If larger projects, the economies of scale allow you to do more things with it. And you're into a whole higher realm of construction costs to begin with. And so sort of kind of a baseline building, if it's a PT concrete 30-story building like our Mirabella project, is going to have a lot more stuff in it that's just sort of comes with that level of building. So you'll get systems that are much more advanced, mechanical systems, for instance, that are much more efficient. You'll get maybe lighting control systems that are much more energy efficient that perhaps a smaller project can't quite justify, or
the cost of doing it.
Or you weigh that payback more carefully in a smaller project. But so that's kind of the scale of the project is probably one of the biggest determinants of that sort of variability.
And does transportation and things like that, does that play into the sustainability concept?
Absolutely. We really look at this is a lot about site selection. And that's a much less, something that's much less in our control often. Sometimes we help our clients select a site. Often they come to us with the site picked. Yes. But it's proximity to transit, it's proximity to other utility services and density that will really affect, for instance, just the cost or the energy impact of people coming and going from the building. Transit, for instance, if it's well served by transit or by bike routes and so forth, and we're seeing a lot of a lot bigger bike rooms and nicer bike rooms in our projects these days. So that's a site and a transportation related issue that we are looking at a lot these days.
And with the kind of the new materials and things, I have a question, are there contractors out there? Is there an issue with getting labor that's skilled at putting up, these different kind of systems or things like that? Is it kind of, I know it's not a new industry, but with the amount of building that we have here, the amount of sustainable building that we have here, is there a crunch on finding?
I think for most of these systems, whether it's a solar hot water system or just a good lighting control system or daylighting system, there are enough contractors, especially I think Portland has a wealth of those sorts of specialties and subcontractors that know those things. You definitely need to make sure you're getting someone who knows that particular technology and is experienced in installing it. But we haven't had experience of not being able to find those people. Unless it's just really busy, like now, and people are too busy to do anything.
Yeah, we're finding that's too busy to do anything. Yes, no, that's true. And then you do cost analysis for the developer in terms of, this is what it's looking like. Here's the run rate you're going to see with doing this product versus this product.
Sometimes a little bit, especially with our engineers, we'll run modeling on different scenarios of a building design and define the energy use intensity of the overall building and try to, from that, project whether one design versus another is going to be more energy efficient. In terms of detail costing, we usually leave that to our general contractors that we usually partner with on during the design process. So, but we and through our experience, we'll know that, well, this sort of system it's
going to lean this way.
Will tend to be a better choice, or will have this sort of typical cost. So, from our experience, we can offer that advice on the cost issues, because it's always weighing the costs versus the benefits and what to include in these projects.
Any big surprises you've seen in the last few years in terms of kind of just a general, trend of sustainability? Of kind of a shucks moment. I wouldn't expect that thing to be as popular.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've sort of, it's been intriguing to me to see sort of, to some extent, the decline of the LEED certification thing. Yes. And I think it is just because it's gotten a little more routine, basic sustainable design in general anyway. And so that's been a bit of a surprise. I'm trying to think if there's something else that's, well, it's interesting. Electric vehicles are becoming much more popular, so we're seeing a lot more EV charging stations in projects, and that, I didn't quite expect that, but it's interesting things pop up.
Well, I know in our world, I mean, there was a lot of developers that we had dealt with that said, my building is LEED quality, but I just didn't go to that final step to get the paperwork done.
Plaque and,
right,
yeah, exactly.
Right, and now so that was a kind of surprising, because again, when it first started, there was a big push. Oh, I want to get LEED, I want to have this, and then I think after 4 or 5 years, a lot of them said maybe is the paperwork worth getting that? Yeah.
I think that's right, and we have a number of clients that, in fact, we're working on an office project down in Salem right now where they said, we basically want to meet LEED requirements, but we don't want to have to go through the certification process and that extra. And
then in our arena, it's the, what really is the benefit to the owner developer? How is the tenant going to pay more? And that's the thing. Is the tenant going to pay more rent to live in a LEED certified, unless we can really show what the cost benefit is? Right. And that's sometimes hard to do, because again, we're sometimes not privy to utility costs in terms of the tenants paying for themselves. So it's been hard to equate that sometimes.
I think that's true. It's hard to equate actual rents that one can get. I think it's almost a thing that some of our developers tell us is that just the absorption and retention rates are a factor, though. If you maybe you're the same rent rates as a comparable product, but if you've got the LEED plaque, or if you can say we've got these great ventilation systems and it's a healthy building, and they might pick your building or stay in your building more.
They'll stay in it longer. We'll see. I think they see it on retention. Yeah, when they say it, they've got the history with it, and they say, "Geez, we want to go look." Well, maybe we're not going to get the same benefit.
Exactly.
So that's been the big.
Yeah. So I think that I think it's harder to actually prove rent increases for some of these things. But
something not on the stand. I'm just curious. What's your thought in terms of a lot of the developments that we're seeing in this area in general? I just saw something. I think in the core, over 60% of the units were ones and studios. Definitely. Are you looking, I mean, as a architect, developer, I need to develop for what's going to be in place 2-3 years down the road. Is there a change that you're seeing on the development side of what do we do with this, the millennial population when they start, getting married, having kids, where are they going to live? I mean, maybe you can shine a little light on that.
Yeah, no, we've certainly seen coming out of the recession, housing units are on average a lot smaller than they were before the recession. And I think there's a couple things. A lot of people left their mortgages during the recession, and the younger crowd, home ownership is less popular, single family home ownership, apartment living is more popular. City of Portland as a perfect example, and rent rates are going up too, and so all of those combined are reducing unit sizes just to make it affordable, just because of the populations that are looking for those are maybe smaller singles or small couple, younger couples and so forth. So a lot more studios and one bedrooms in the mix these days than there were 5 or 10 years ago. And that's I think that will, at least in Portland, continue in that trend. Just again, the rental pressures are forcing unit sizes down just to make them affordable in desirable locations. Unless you're willing to go out, to the more the periphery and the outer ring suburbs and so forth, where things are bigger, you'll see more 3-bedroom and so forth.
Yeah, the question we just get is, where are you going to find, larger, and we're not saying large as they were, 10 years ago, but, getting away from the 400 to 500 square foot units, where does that person in their lifespan, when they start,
Right, and then what happens?
Where do they go?
Next step.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. It might be further out. There might be some new developments that get larger in town. There probably will be higher end on the market points. But it's interesting. Right now, we're not seeing any movement for larger units, at least closer in locations.
And in your arena, what are you guys looking forward? I mean, what's kind of in your crystal ball, or trends that you guys you looked as to this is where it's going or not where it's going?
Well, we're starting to, see, I think, a bit of the crest of this current, growth phase in terms of housing development and so forth. So I think we see a bit of a cooling off of that in the, next 12 to 24 months. Right. But, we have a diversified practice as well. So we're multifamily housing, I think, is the market sector that is most subject to these sorts of balloons and busts. But so we're looking to our other market sectors to try to.
Well, on this one, we really feel like multifamily's led us kind of out of this. Out of this recession, and we happen to live in a spot that everybody wants to live. Exactly. So which has helped driving the whole housing, and now it's office and industrial. People always ask me, where are we in the cycle? And I would say, we really should go ask the office and industrial guys or people, because if we continue to have people moving here and continue to have job growth, they're going to have a place to live. Now, we may have to change what we're designing to accommodate for that, but we're going to have to house people somewhere. So as we continue to be a desirable place, that's going to be what's going to happen. So
exactly right.
Thank you again for coming. And I think the big takeaway on this is that sustainable development is here to stay. It's not just a buzzword, and like I said, it's not just about getting a LEED plaque. It's really about sustainable products from the terms of, as you said, cradle to grave, from where they're coming from usage. So again, I think it's very vital for people to get involved in that and educate themselves, because there's all this new product coming out. So again, thank you for coming again.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.